Hello, and welcome to the So You Want to Be a Marine Biologist podcast, where we learn about the ocean, share sea stories, and explore ocean careers. I'm your host, Kara Muzia. Let's dive into today's episode. Hey, do you want to help the oceans? Have you considered a career in marine biology, but maybe just aren't sure where to start? Head on over to my website, marinebio.life, and subscribe to my newsletter. When you subscribe, you'll receive a free PDF download where you'll learn the 7 steps to becoming a marine biologist without the degree. Hello, mermaids, pirates, ocean lovers, and land lubbers. Welcome to today's show. Before we get into today's episode, I want to give a huge shout out and thank you to my friend Mitch for becoming the latest patron over at patreon.com. If you, like Mitch, are interested in becoming a patron and helping to keep the ocean-tastic episodes coming, head on over to patreon.com/marinebiolife. For less than a dive tank refill or a cup of coffee, you too can help keep the podcast going. That's patreon.com/marinebiolife, patreon.com/marinebiolife. Question: what do you call a book on DIY underwater gardening? A self-kelp book. What do seals do when they need medical attention? They seek kelp. Bren Smith is a commercial fisherman turned ocean farmer, author of the book Eat Like a Fish, and the founder of GreenWave, a network of regenerative ocean farms found worldwide. Join us in today's episode as we discuss how Bren decided to make the leap from commercial fishing in some of the world's most hostile fisheries to aquaculture and, ultimately, regenerative ocean farming. We discuss how ocean farming is the farm of the future and how kelp is the new kale and how you, today, can help make an impact on our oceans. Please enjoy. Bren, welcome to the So You Want to Be a Marine Biologist podcast.
Thanks. Honor to be on. This is fun.
So I want to start with you a little bit. We're going to take a step back in time. You were a commercial fisherman, which is really fascinating to me. And you fished in the Bering Sea, and which is one of the most notorious seas in the world. Could you explain a little bit the appeal behind it and why you fished there for as long as you did?
Yeah. I grew up in Newfoundland, Canada, which was, fishing was absolutely everywhere in everybody's blood. Right next to a fisherman's co-op, kids were selling cod tongues door to door. Just what you think of as the sort of idyllic artisanal fishery back in the 70s and early 80s. And, I wanted to be a fisherman. And it's interesting. I look back and I wonder why. And it's, they wake up, they head off on the horizon. They own their own boats, no boss, self-directed life, and then just this pride of feeding your country and your community. And that was just really appealing. So I dropped out of high school when I was 14 and headed out to sea. And I fished in Gloucester and Lynn, did lobster, tuna, and then headed to the Bering Sea because that's sort of the walkabout of any young fisherman. You head to Alaska, and I worked in the canneries first, and then was out in the high seas, and I absolutely loved it. This is the thing. It was a really unsustainable way to fish. We were pillaging the oceans, but what a job! I still miss it. It's like the high seas, the thrill, the humility, just being in this day right in the middle of the ocean, and just I miss it a ton.
I can imagine, because you went out for how long at a time? Days, weeks, and you're just kind of in the middle of the ocean at the mercy of her whims.
Yeah, exactly. No, we'd be out. We'd actually offload in the middle of the Bering Sea, like boats would come, and so we were out there for long periods of time.
Amazing. So you realize at some point, though, that commercial fishing, as much fun as it is and as much as you loved it, wasn't your end all be all, and decided to go back to school. And I really love that you have a quote in your book, which I love, by the way, that you suffered under the iron heel of math and science when you studied oceanography, which kind of seems like the next logical step. Like commercial fishing, I'll just study the ocean a little bit more. So could you explain kind of how your evolution through college went?
My dad was a real smart guy. I don't know what happened to me, and he was actually a linguist and a mathematical linguist. So there was just a lot of numbers when I was a kid. But I had probably piles of learning disabilities back when I was in school. There were no tests. There were nothing. know anything. So there was just that's why I dropped out of high school. There was just a sort of deep frustration and incredible boredom, quite honestly. But then I went to the after the boats, decided to head to college and give it a try. And yeah, I wanted to be like the Jacques Cousteau, right? And it was just not going to happen. like, like not even close. Like I couldn't follow the concepts. I couldn't remember anything. It's just like I didn't have these. There are these basic skills I think you learn in high school that I just didn't have. And in fact, I showed up in college and I was like a wild animal, right? I was straight. I was 2 days off the boats. I'd flown in from Dutch and long hair, beard, just a mess. I couldn't see out of one of my eyes because I had chemicals splash, and so it's just an animal. And I got in the dorm, and I was like, "This is unbelievable. I'm not going to live in a dorm. This is ridiculous." Like they were, I was packed in there. It was like a frat dorm or something. And so I moved out. I think my third day out to a golf course, the woods in a golf course, and built a lean-to, and that's where I spent my first semester. So it's like, so college was definitely an adjustment for me.
You made it your own experience.
Yeah.
So at some point you kind of realized that there's some issues with commercial fishing that you started to open your eyes to. What were some of the things that really struck home for you and started to make you want to pivot away from the commercial fishing and into something a little bit more sustainable?
Yeah, I mean, humans get too good at what they do, right? Too
Mhm.
efficient, and it's a fascinating history because the industrial fishing really came about after World War II, when
Mhm.
a lot of the technology that was developed for World War II, the sonar, things like that, and the large boats were repurposed for to chase fish. And
Mhm.
even so the World War II pilots, they were put on spotter planes to go find the fish, and so that was a big change in the ocean. And by the time I hit there, it was just pillage all around. It was just pulling up entire ecosystems with our trawls. We're in big, huge boats. We're fishing around the clock. And, when you pull up fish, you only got a permits for a couple. And so everything else you just throw overboard. And from the pressure, a lot of them die, as they're getting pulled out. So it was just seas of death. I was young and I wanted to spend my life on the ocean. Thinking 50 years out. Like my captains were thinking like 10 years out. They were
Mhm.
just going to fish the last fish. So a whole generation of us sort of began thinking that we needed something new because we just knew this wouldn't last. And like I had this inkling, these suspicions, but then back home in Newfoundland, the cod stocks crashed. 30,000 people thrown out of work overnight. And it was
Mhm.
stunning to watch an entire sort of culture and economy just disappear because the ecosystem was not taken care of. And just to see these hungry ghosts, the fishermen just walking the streets, nothing to do. And that was sort of the big turning point for me, just realizing there aren't going to be any jobs on a dead ocean. And I think we're facing that again in the era of climate change. So in a way, my career has tracked the sort of challenges and ecological collapses that we've seen on the ocean.
Yeah, absolutely. The collapse of the cod industry was one that definitely rattled, I mean, I think more than just the fishery itself, it kind of rattled the world that the oceans aren't completely bottomless, right? There is a limit, and we hit it. So for you, you were looking for more sustainable options and you had turned to aquaculture, which on paper really does seem sustainable, right? Like we'll just farm what we can't catch, and that seems really great. Could you explain what working on the salmon farm was like for you and why it was a very eye opening experience in that respect, too?
Yeah, so it really did make sense. We were going to feed the planet by growing fish, and these were going to be the new sort of sustainable jobs for fishermen. But then when I hit the salmon farms, it was just basically all the mistakes made on land in industrial agriculture were shifted and made in the early days of aquaculture. So use of pesticides, antibiotics, terrible, like using huge percentage of wild fish to grow farm fish. In fact, it was like 5 to 1 or 8 to 1 at that point of the amount of per pound of a wild fish it took to grow 1 pound of farm fish. So
Mhm.
here we were continually depleting the wild fish stocks just to grow some salmon. And the I think the if I look back, the real trouble with aquaculture from its start was it grew around markets. It grew around what people wanted to eat. So like salmon and tunas and things like that. But that's a wild palate. That was
Mhm.
developed based on the fish that swam in the sea. And no one asked this fundamental question. Like no one asked the ocean, what does it make sense to grow? What's unique about the
Mhm.
ocean as an agricultural space? And so that was the journey I went on after I left the farms. And every time I've hit land, I've gotten lost. Like every time I've been pushed off the sea. And I think that's my story, struggling to stay in the ocean and then getting pushed off. And but just wanting to die on my boat one day. Like that remains the goal. So I just went on this search of, what does it make sense to grow in the ocean?
Right. Absolutely. And I mean, some of the aquaculture is an old tradition, right? I've read in your book, I had no idea how old it was. It dates back to like 475 BC China. I was like, that's that's impressive. I thought it was more of a newer invention to combat what we're facing with overfishing.
And it goes back even further, like, thousands of years ago, Pacific Northwest indigenous communities were building clam walls, right, to
Mhm.
cultivate clams. This is a history that's just forever, and sort of I'm just a moment in that. But I didn't invent anything, right? I mean, I'm just like a piece of this long journey. And I'd say fish aquaculture it's tried to really get better. I have good friends
Mhm.
that do it. They're just trying to continually be more sustainable. From my perspective, we need to get beyond sustainable. Like sustainable is about making a bad thing better. So your
Mhm.
clothes have a high footprint,
Mhm.
environmental footprint. So you try to lower that. But the opportunity and the really important thing we need to do amongst the climate crisis is be restorative, regenerate.
Mhm.
And how do we use our food system, our farming system to actually breathe life back into the ocean, not just lower back?
Hey, Kara here. I hear it all the time. How do I become a marine biologist? Or my niece wants to help the ocean. Where does she even start? I hear from students, yes, and also nurses, HR professionals, and other mid career folks who wonder if they could still make their dream of working with sea turtles or sharks come true, wondering if it's too late to answer the ocean's call. Here's what I've learned after 20 years in the field and hundreds of interviews. There's no straight line, no magic degree, and no gatekeeper. You create the path forward. If this sounds overwhelming and vague, I've created 2 tools to help you stop wondering what if and start moving forward with clarity and purpose. The first is my free guide, Be a Marine Biologist Without the Degree. Over 1,000 people have already downloaded this guide and taken their first step towards ocean impact. Inside, you'll find 7 concrete, doable actions to help you get started, whether you're just exploring or ready to make a change. Then there's the Ocean Blueprint. This is a 30-day self-paced course that helps you build your unique path into ocean science and conservation without quitting your job or going back to school. Inside the Ocean Blueprint, you'll get daily prompts to explore your interests, skills, and next steps, a structure that turns overwhelm into real momentum, and a bonus section to root your work into ocean connection. You don't have to wait for a degree, a perfect plan, or permission. Whether you're wading in or ready to take the deep dive, these tools are here to help you move from dreaming to doing. The ocean called. Are you ready to answer? Links in the show notes and on my website, karagracemusia.com. I can't wait to see the waves you'll make. Absolutely. That makes total sense. And there were some issues with aquaculture that you had highlighted that I wasn't aware of. I had understood about, that added, like, you have to use wild caught fish to feed the farm fish and using antibiotics. And then obviously fish have excrement and that has to go somewhere. So that contributes to other issues. But one of the things I thought was interesting was these fish escape and then they compete with the native stocks, and they actually become invasive species. So I
Yeah.
thought that was really interesting in that Alaska and Washington state had banned salmon farming, for example, because of this.
Yeah, yeah. There's the fish, continually there are fish escapes. There was just one in Newfoundland. They're just all down in Chile and Norway. They're all over the place, and the reason is it's really hard to fight the ocean. The ocean is
Right.
this like really brutal place, and so you have these huge pens out there, and the ocean just in a storm tears them apart, and so the
Mhm.
fish escape and you have these sort of mutants and they're very aggressive mutants in the battle with wild fish they win, and that's really it's really unfortunate.
Yeah, absolutely. And it kind of stems to another issue once we're out of the ocean with seafood mislabeling, which is something that I've also been aware of. And I guess I kind of always attributed it to wild caught fisheries, but it's a thing in aquaculture as well. Is the fish that you're eating isn't always what it says it is, which is a really interesting phenomenon that happens.
Yeah, I mean, I forget there was a report that came out about New York sushi restaurants, and something like I forget the exact number, but like a quarter or a third of all fish tested, they did genetic testing, were not what they said they were. They were
Mm.
mislabeled, and that's stunning, right? That's like massive, massive fraud. And in the aquaculture industry, I think the reason is yeah, it was terrible tasting fish when we first did it. It was all discolored and it was just awful. But it's easy and cheaper to grow, and so there was a huge push to mislabel farm fish as wild fish, and so aquaculture had the worst brand name in the grocery store, and so what they did was really start mislabeling, and it's just it's a real tragedy, and it's one of the reasons you really want to make sure and ask where your seafood's from and try to buy as close to your community as possible. I go down to the day boats here and buy my fish, and you know exactly where it's coming from.
Absolutely. You have a quote in your book from chef and author Mark Bittman. It says that buying the right kind of seafood seems to require an advanced degree in endangered species. Fish shopping, in short, is not for sissies and is fraught for anyone with an environmental conscience.
Yeah.
And that resonates.
Yeah.
It's really true.
Well, I mean that's right now. There are all these apps you can get, all right, on
Mhm.
like what fish is blue, green, okay to eat, and it's always switching around, and it's just so complicated. And what happens is, I think the consumers just give up and go buy chicken. You know, that's what they do, and that's not a solution. Yeah, I mean, like even farmed fish have a lower carbon footprint than chicken, right?
Mm.
So that's not what we need to do. And everybody asks me like, "Oh, what fish should I eat?" And I'm like, I don't know. I don't think there is a fish. If you're going to eat fish, it should be like beef. It should be this delicious something you eat like twice a month, right?
Mhm.
And just cherish it and love it as one of the last wild foods. But as far as it being sort of daily center of the plate, I just don't think it makes sense in the era of climate change.
Yeah, absolutely. So you did go on a search to find a more sustainable option, and not just sustainable, but regenerative option. And that's kind of how you came into shellfish. I mean, that's what you could tell people. You What kind of fish should I eat is shellfish, right? Farmed shellfish.
Yep.
Could you share the story of how Thimble Island Oyster Company got started?
Yeah, yeah. So, I bounced around and ended up in Long Island Sound, which was, in Connecticut here, which was a pretty tough place for a Newfoundlander to end up, and really struggled here for quite a while, but then found the ocean, and it was a very different ocean economy. Shellfish had gone back generations, and right near me was Stony Creek, Thimble Islands, and used to be this one of the centers of oystering in the entire country. So I remade myself as an oysterman and started very slow, and I was terrible at it. I killed millions of oysters because I was a fisherman. I chase, hunt, and kill things as opposed to carefully cultivating and caring for like these little baby seed, and then over 18 months and making sure they're okay. So I just ran a death camp forever. But over time, I learned to do it. I developed this blue thumb. Although I miss commercial fishing, I've really developed a pride in growing things and farming things.
Makes sense. You have a lot of stories and kind of how in your book about how Thimble Island got started and some of your trials and errors, and two of the major events that happened that seem really formative in the rest of your ocean farming and how you've evolved are hurricanes, Sandy and Irene. And could you explain a little bit how they were kind of a wake up call for you and how you shifted your models after that?
Yeah, so I ran my oyster farm for I don't know 7 years, and it was the emergent moment of sort of the Brooklyn food scene. So I was doing very well, really building my business. I had the first community supported fishery, a CSF for shellfish. Things were going great, and then hurricane. I think it was Sandy that hit first. I forget. I don't forget if it was Irene or Sandy. Came in and destroyed 90% of my crop. The storm surge came in, buried all my oysters. So I picked myself up. I was like, okay, rough year. Let me start again. Next year, it happened again. Second hurricane. And I was like, oh my God, this is the new normal. There's no way I can run a farm, a small business, if there are hurricanes coming in all the time. But again, I didn't want to leave the water. I was just refused to go anywhere. So I started to adapt and change my farm and just figure out what would a climate resilient farm look like. And one of the things that I learned was you really have to think about the architecture underwater. And that's kind of what we're doing. Like, what kind of structure do you build that can weather this kind of weather? And what I learned was you want to go very, very simple and cheap. And you want to be a willow, not an oak. So when the storms come in, you don't want to like stand there and just try to take it and make sure everything holds. What you want to do is just let that farm go with the weather, sink under the water, and then pop back up. And think of the farmers really just think of it as underwater scaffolding made out of ropes and buoys. So those storm surges come in, the buoys just sink underwater, the ropes bend, and then everything pops back up. So that design principle of simplicity and not fighting the power of the seas has just become really important.
Absolutely, that makes sense. And I want to take a step back. We talked a bit about finfish aquaculture and kind of the problems with that, but and we said that shellfish is really a great way to be restorative, but I didn't really explain why. So, I mean, oysters I know can filter 50 gallons of water a day, which is insanely impressive. I think clams and mussels have a similar filtration system, and it helps with a lot of the extra nutrients that are in the water. So, it's kind of one of the reasons why this restorative farming is so applicable. Now, how did you added another layer though? You have 3D ocean farms. It's not just shellfish. Well, how did you get into kelp?
Yeah, it was, believe me, I never ever planned in my life to grow vegetables underwater, right? Like, in fact, when I started, I was getting laughed off the docks, right? It was just by everybody else. But I mean, the farm, think of it as a vertical underwater garden where you have these anchors at the edges, and then ropes or lines up to the surface with buoys, and then another set of lines just below the surface connecting those two anchor systems. And then from there, we grow our kelp vertically downwards. We've got scallops and lantern nets, mussels and mussel socks, all hanging from this structure. And then oysters in cages, and the clams like the mud a lot. And this just the sea basket approach just allows you to grow a species year round. Now, one of the seasons where I didn't have a crop was winter. And I just started searching around, and I found here in Connecticut, it was bizarre, one of the world's experts in seaweed farming was Dr. Charlie Yerish. So him and I teamed up and incorporated seaweeds into the farm. And over time, it's just really makes sense because it's easier to grow plants than animals. Kelp grows incredibly fast. It's a winter crop, and I can use that same gear. So yeah, I've seaweeds become just a center of the farm, and it is pretty amazing to just at the springtime just pull up this wall of 20-foot beautiful brown kelp. Like it's that's just like thousands and thousands of pounds of it on the line.
Could you explain how you harvest kelp? You had a little bit in your book about how you have 3 barrels and like different parts of the kelp go to different industries based on how basically how pretty it is.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, first, you'd be curious how we seed the kelp. We
Yeah.
do is we go out and collect a couple blades of kelp that are reproductive. You can tell kelp is reproductive when there's this chocolate stripe on it. So we take that back, and we've got a hatchery here, and we basically release that little seed, the sporophytes and stuff, into tanks. And in the tanks, we have these just PVC pipes with little string around it, just thin, like looks like household string wrapped all around it, and that the seed sticks to the string. We grow it out a little bit to about 1-2 millimeters, and then we bring that out on the farm and unravel that string around the lines, the ropes out there, and then the seed transfers to the rope and then just grows. And it's amazingly easy because all it's doing, I don't have to feed, I don't have to fertilize, I don't have to water the kelp. It's soaking up sunlight and the nutrients in the water. My job as an ocean farmer is just to find those nutrient sweet spots, like make sure the kelp as it gets bigger and heavier is still sitting in the perfect place in the water column. Now, the way we harvest, and harvest hits, we start harvesting early spring and it runs for a couple months. And we start early with baby leaf kelp. And this sort of the real short blades, because we want to thin the lines. So we go and we pick the delicate, like every third blade we'll pick, and that's delicious. The chefs like it. It's like really translucent. It's really got a really delicate mouthfeel. What's left on the line allows the kelp to grow bigger and thicker. It just has more room to do it. So when it grows out, what we do is we haul those lines out of the water and hang them over the boat. And we got 3 barrels because we sort of have this whole leaf approach. Like, how do we use every piece of the plant to do it for some market? So we cut off the stipes, that's the stems, and those are turned into pickles. They're just delicious as like a bread and butter pickle we got a bunch of local processors that do that. 2/3 of the blade then we cut off, and that's going now either to noodles, it's going to plant-based burgers, soups, all sorts of like kelp bouillon cubes, and that's just the really high quality tasty kelp. And then the last third is usually degraded and biofouled, so because that's the oldest part of the plant, and that we use for fertilizer. We got that off, and what's interesting, kelp has been used for generations as fertilizer. In fact, in San Diego in the early 1900s, there were 1,500 workers producing fertilizer and feed for 700 Midwestern farms. Like, this is just something we have always done because the kelp is packed full of micronutrients and nitrogen, all things that farmers need. And that way we have a use for every piece of the crop. This year, part of that, the degraded, also went for bioplastics. So seaweed straws and packaging. It's amazing, right? I don't know how much folks know, but plastics is a huge issue in the ocean. Right? It's leaching in, and you have all these fish with microplastics in them. So here, as a farmer, I can begin growing seaweeds that's actually used for packaging to replace fossil fuel plastic packaging. So that's really, really exciting for us.
That's really interesting. I didn't realize that. Now, and that kind of brings it full circle, right? A lot of what we find in the ocean comes from 80% of ocean plastics are actually from land-based sources. So if it comes from the ocean and we use it and it goes back, it kind of seems like it's a fine thing. It's full circle.
Yeah.
That's really interesting. And now kelp is amazing in and of itself. We talked a little bit about the benefits of shellfish, but kelps are referred to as the sequoias of the sea and can sequester a lot of carbon and also a lot of nutrients, which is why it makes them such beneficial fertilizers, which I thought was really fascinating. And I like that you have a campaign, Kelp is the New Kale. And but it took you a little while for it to kind of catch on and to be more of a normal on people's plates. Could you explain a little bit of the process of kind of having people out to the farm and getting people on board with eating sea vegetables?
Yeah. I mean, Listen, seaweeds, it's got the worst name. It's got weed in it. And, it's like, besides sushi, I wouldn't eat it. Like, it's just kind of disgusting in my head.
Yeah.
Um, but I fell in love with a foodie, and we just went on this journey with all these incredible chefs. I mean, the amazing thing is we're the one of the great culinary moments in history, right? And that's really what we need. And the job of the chef is to make things that we can grow, no matter how disgusting they are, delicious and beautiful. And if you can't do that as a chef, like, quit your job. Like, your job is to make a delicious climate cuisine that's going to breathe life back into our ecosystems, into our planet. We worked with all sorts of chefs: Rene Renzepi, David Chang, had them out on the boat, did tours. And what was interesting was they tasted the kelp. And my kelp, I grow at the southernmost region of this sugar kelp. So it has a different flavor and taste. It's sort of milder. It's a thinner blade than, say, up in Alaska or Maine. And so the chefs are like, "Wow, I've never tasted kelp that was like this." And there we're getting into the terroirs, right? Just like with wine, we get different flavors from different regions. Each harbor, each place on the coast has a different flavor because it's a different mix of fresh water, salinity, nutrients, how high in the water column you're growing. So we took that terroir and started developing different foods around it. So, one of the first things we did was kelp noodles, and we had Brooks Headley in New York, who was a pastry chef, and then he took it on upon himself to go all vegan in his restaurant. But his idea was to get people to eat vegetables by making them unhealthy. Right? Which is brilliant, right? And so we made
Great.
some unhealthy dishes, right? We took kelp noodles, which is just kelp blanched and then thrown through a noodle machine. And he made barbecue kelp with parsnips and breadcrumbs. And that's brilliant. You get the heat of the barbecue sauce, that roundness of the parsnips, the crunch of the breadcrumbs. And no one even knew that they didn't even think twice about it being seaweed. And that's what we want to do. We want to sort of de-seaweed, de-sushify this local cuisine that we're able to grow. And kelp is a good sort of on ramp to the 10,000 different seaweeds that are in the ocean. There are thousands of things we can eat. Kelp is extremely mild tasting and it turns this
Mhm.
bright green when you blanch it. So the aesthetics is really strong. But, like, imagine being a chef and finding out there were, like, arugulas, corns, tomatoes, lettuces that you'd never seen or cooked with before. And that's what we're looking at the ocean. Like, this can be a journey of deliciousness as we discover new things to eat in the ocean.
And it's still, even though you're trying to make them unhealthy, they are quite healthful. Really, they have more vitamin C than orange juice, calcium, more calcium than milk, more protein than soybeans, and they're loaded with omega threes, which is where we say, eat your fish so you get your omega threes, but really that's where the fish get it. So that's it's a really great point. I like that you're converting, longtime foodies and writers from, ew, I won't eat that, to they mix it with root vegetables and they're like, this is actually really tasty and delicious.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
And it appeals to not just foodies, but you actually took your kelp noodle dish out to a festival and tried it out on everyday folk, and they loved it as well, right?
Yeah, I mean, drunk plumbers loved it. And that seemed like the real test. I went to, like, this beer test and tried it, and folks are coming back multiple times. So I was like, okay, we're on to something now.
That's awesome. So you have your 3D farm, you're creating restorative, regenerative ocean farming, and you felt a call to do even more. So could you explain the story of how GreenWave started to catch on?
Yeah, so, GreenWave, we decided to create a nonprofit whose job is to train the next generation of regenerative ocean farmers. And what we want to do is train 10,000 new ocean farmers in the next 10 years. We have a waiting list of 6,000 people for our programming just in the US, requests to start farms in over 100 countries around the world. Like, there is a lot of momentum out there, which is
That's
really
awesome.
exciting. What our programming looks like, we got two sets of programming. One is farmer training and the other is innovation. The farmer training, it's got two pieces. One is a high touch program, and the high touch has a social justice focus. It's targeted indigenous communities and fishermen who are directly affected by climate change. In fact, we just started the first indigenous owned seaweed hatchery in the country, and that's so important because communities need to own their own seed. That's this We can't have a Monsanto situation of privatization of seed. And that's what that looks like is we help with permitting, we provide seed, we help people set up farms. It's very high touch. The low touch program is, and we're just rolling this out now, is an online platform. And what that looks like is you can go on and you can actually start building a farm, right? You can say how many acres you want to lease, what's your bottom like, is it mud, is it sand? And it'll build a farm for you, a farm design, and create a budget, lets you know how much that's going to cost, and it generates some permitting language. And then the toolkit also walks you through the entire season of what are the key things you know. The second big piece of programming is innovation. And that is one is market development. And that's where we're working up and down the supply chain in order to sort of find these choke points and help fix them. So, an example is actually COVID coming into harvest season, and we couldn't process in the processing hubs. So, what we did was we found old shut down tobacco farms here in New England
Mm.
and took the kelp and dried it in the tobacco farms. So we were able to hold it and store it and sell it. So maybe kelp isn't the new kale, maybe it's the new tobacco because it kind of looks like it, right? It was just hung it. The workers at these old tobacco farms knew exactly what to do with it. And then the other part of the innovation program is the data piece, and sensors. So the challenge with ocean farming is that essentially our soil turns over 1,000 times a day. Like we have no control of the nutrients, and we
Hmm.
can't see what we grow because it's underwater. So ROV technology, sensor technology is absolutely essential in order for us to be good farmers. So we're developing a platform that talks to sensors, so we're able to be precision farmers and really find those nutrient sweet spots in the water, know exactly when we can plant things like that, and that's just going to be key and exciting. The other part of that, those sensors and things allow us to track the amount of carbon we're soaking up, the amount of nitrogen, those ecosystem services we provide so farmers can get paid for it. And that data has value. All that information is being pulled together. And so we had a program last year where farmers were getting paid to collect data on their farms for scientists. And I think that's really exciting, where the farm of the future looks like growing food, growing agricultural products and bio plastics, harvesting data, and harvesting ecosystem services. And when you get those quadrants, I think that's how you get climate resiliency, because there are all these different income streams that allows you to really be flexible, because the weather's going to get crazy out there, so we really need to reimagine what farms look like.
Absolutely. And it's a stark contrast to what current agriculture looks like. Predominantly they don't really monitor their environmental services at all, and they don't really monitor what the ecosystem around their farm looks like. So it's definitely a stark contrast to what currently is the status quo. And I like that, if you stay small scale enough, it makes it more palatable and you can get a lot more data that way.
This one's exciting in that it's sort of a blank slate. And so our
Yeah.
chance is to build something from the bottom up and do it the right way. Learn all those lessons from land based farming, not make all the mistakes both on land and the mistakes in industrial aquaculture, and just build it the right way. Make sure seed is not privatized. Make sure that there's sort of social justice is embedded in the DNA of this industry. Make sure water is rights are cheap and affordable. Make sure indigenous communities have access to their own water near their villages. And so I think that's what's exciting, and that's what's drawing so many people to this field, is that, like, okay, we have all these lessons, and let's just build something we're proud of in this new era.
Absolutely. So you talked a little bit about you have a toolkit online that makes it accessible for anybody in the world to figure out exactly what their farm could look like. Is this strictly based in cold waters, or is this a little bit more applicable to anyone that has a little bit warmer climate?
Yeah, so there's something that can be grown everywhere because there are so
Right.
many different species. We're
Right.
starting with cold water species because it's what we really know and know well.
Hmm.
And the economics of it works, where we know that we can grow kelp and shellfish high volume in small areas, and so it makes it profitable. Once we build this, we're going to keep on adding new species, bringing in experts in order to do it. So there'll be an expansion, so that there'll be information of how to grow in the Gulf, how to do sargassum in Puerto Rico, things like that. But that's going to be later stages. I know my expertise is definitely northern.
Makes sense. Well, with sargassum, I think we don't have an issue so much with growing it. It would just be kind of best way to harvest it.
Exactly. And down in the Caribbean, sargassum is just filling up the beaches. One of the
Right.
things we can do is take that and repurpose it. Like sargassum is also amazing fertilizer if you have a fertilizer plant. And right now, what a lot of people are doing is digging big holes and putting the holes and covering it up. So we just need to think of the ocean as this place where there are all these nutrients that have value in the rest of our food system. And then, there's hundreds of different kind of shellfish we can grow at the same time. This shouldn't just be about seaweeds and kelp.
So, if somebody wanted to start a 3D ocean farm, the first step is, I mean, you have to get land
Hmm.
and lease permitting, which is something that I had learned a few years ago, and something you really kind of expounded upon in your book is that you don't own the ocean floor, you lease it, and there's permits that are involved with that. Is getting your permit the first step, and then what comes after that?
Yeah. And I mean, you can call your Sea Grant, you can call your Department of Aquaculture really to find out the state of permitting, because it's really different in different places. New England, it's really easy to get permits. Alaska, it's now easy to get permits. California is very, very difficult. Difficult could be not just getting them, but also the cost. So in California, it costs close to $100,000 to do a survey, an environmental survey,
Hmm.
once you lease. And that's completely prohibitive to regular folks like me. Here in Connecticut, it's totally free. And
Hmm.
my leases cost $25 per acre per year. Totally affordable. It's amazing. Anyway, the first thing you want to do is look at leases. And then you just want to start you want to like sort of look at your life and decide what kind of farmer you want to be. Do you want to keep your job and just farm in the winter? Do you want to farm year round? So that's the first thing. And then the second is you want to take a look, like if you've decided, say, okay, I'm going to be a farmer, you want to look at who you know and what kind of resources. Is there a dock that you're able to keep close to the farm, so there won't be a long distance from your from shore to the farm? Do you have friends that have boats that can move anchors around? Right? Is there a good food economy in your area, or is it far away? Are there universities that can be great allies for hatcheries and things like that? All of these things, and none of it is sort of yes or no. It's just what's the mix, and predicting what the challenges and the opportunities are as you begin farming. Once you do that, and then I think, you go to our toolkit and begin the budgeting, the design process. You're going to have to do that for when you submit your permits. You're going to need farm designs, but really getting a sense of what cost is. And it's really important is to start slow, because it doesn't, like, the ocean might not let you grow your crops where you want to. So what you do is you just put one or two lines in 150 feet long, seed them, and just watch it for a year and see how many pounds per foot you're getting. And from that, you're able to build a business plan. And then, if that's looking good, if you're getting good volume on the farm, then you can scale quickly. Then you can put a lot of lines in and really have a fully functioning farm.
So it really is it's a multi-year slow process. It's not like today I could be like, I'm gonna have an ocean farm, and by the end of the month have a thriving farm.
Yeah, yeah, no. No, it should, it requires planning, and you got to go in eyes wide open. I mean, I
Mhm.
farm all winter and snowing blizzards. I'm breaking ice off the gunnels with a sledgehammer. You have to like that, and you need some skills. So people come out on my farm in the summer and they're like, "Wow, I want this life." And I'm like, "Yeah, come out in December." And I love it, but not everybody will.
Yes. It's something that I find a lot with anybody that wants to work out in the field, and aspiring marine biologists. They have this perception that they can just go and dive and it'll always be really clear and perfect, and they'll be on coral reefs, and I'm like, well, you might get a job on the coral reefs, but the chances of it being clear every single day are really slim to none. And you're probably going to go out and seas, and the visibility might not be great. And there's more to it than just all these beautiful idyllic days, which do
Exactly.
happen.
Exactly.
You have some principles listed in your book from GreenWave, and I'm curious to see if they've kind of changed a little bit. And we touched a little bit already in the podcast about who is farming matters, kind of keeping it small, putting the emphasis on indigenous people, protecting the ocean commons, making sure that the ocean's accessible for everybody. And I really love the value of ecosystem services. One of the things that I thought was really interesting, the point that you brought up, was that to go beyond organics. Could you explain a little bit why that's not totally feasible in the ocean?
Yeah. I mean, organics drives me crazy in the ocean because like organic means that you can control the environment, you know what is going into your crops, right? And
Mhm.
you make sure you're not using pesticides, you control fertilizer, antibiotic use, things like that. Well, the ocean, whether you're growing fish or shellfish and seaweeds, you just have no control, right? You have the whole idea is that currents are rushing through and bringing food, stuff that the crops need through. And so an organic standard, I think, that's just adopting land-based format to the ocean. It makes no sense. It's kind of just lazy. And we need a new labeling system for the ocean. And I like regenerative, right? What are
Mhm.
the crops that are breathing life back into the ocean? And that's what we want to do, and that's what you want to encourage, and that's what you want to eat, and that's what's healthy. So that regenerative label. So GreenWave is working on a regenerative label, and we're actually hoping to roll that out next spring.
Awesome. And I saw that you had a goal of planting 1 million acres of regenerative crops in the next 10 years. Where are you on that?
Yes, so we are working in 7 states now. We're also working in New Zealand. We just hired someone to start tracking that metric to see how exactly how much is being planted around the world of seaweeds and shellfish. We really believe that we need to go to scale. But scale doesn't have to be big 1,000-acre farms, right? It can be hundreds of small scale farms that
Mhm.
network and do production that add up to serious volume. But the reason we need to serious volume is, the climate change is real, as everybody knows. It's here and now, and we need to grow these crops that capture carbon, nitrogen, that lower impact, and are alternatives to land-based foods. And so, we can't just be sort of like small scale farmers markets level. We need to think big and broad.
Absolutely. You grow different types of sea vegetables, correct? Which is your favorite to grow or eat?
I mean, I'm not a foodie, right? I mean, I eat it. Like, I still eat at McDonald's and the gas station and things like that. Like, that's my favorite food.
Okay. How
You know?
how about your wife's? Because she's the foodie.
Yeah, exactly. She makes an incredible kelp kimchi that's just
Mm.
really, really, really tasty. So she bottles those, and so the kelp is something she uses a lot. The other thing about kelp, it's a flavor enhancer because it's packed full of umami. So she'll take like vegetables and things like that and throw some kelp in the boiling water just to bring the flavors out. So she's a heavy user in that way. And then kelp noodles are just an easy dish at the end of the day. You come home from work and you throw them in. It's 5 minutes, and you can throw some spaghetti sauce on it. So that's popular around our house.
Awesome. And it's not just that you have kelp at your disposal because you're a kelp farmer, but it's actually becoming more and more readily available in grocery stores and stuff in other places as well.
Yeah, it's really coming online. I mean, there are going to be challenges along the way for sure, but we really are seeing momentum. What's really interesting? There's a whole line of plant-based burgers made with kelp that's rolling out this spring, and they're tasty. It's like kelp and mushrooms and beets, I think, and that's a whole different level. One of the things no one knows is that in the 1990s, McDonald's had a seaweed burger, and it was on the menu for 5 years. It was called the McLean, and it became the official hamburger of the National Basketball Association. But they just didn't ever mention that there was seaweed in it. That was kept a secret. So taking kelp and weaving it into other dishes and other foods, I think, is going to be key.
Absolutely. So, if somebody wants to start their own farm, what advice would you give them?
Don't quit your job right away. Make sure the ocean is going to let you grow in this area, and really think about what your network is, because it's really important to lean on friends, folks at the docks, scientists, chefs. Just you write down on a piece of paper who you know and how that might help you start a farm, and go in for the long haul. Just think of this as your life's work. The other thing, if you don't want to start a farm, if you don't want to, you're not a fan of ice and snow, there are opportunities that are on land. Like, you could start a hatchery. We have budgets for small scale hatcheries, for big hatcheries. You can literally start them in your basement. It's not hard to do. And right now there's a shortage of seed supply right in the East Coast where I am. The other thing, you could start a small business of value added products, right? Like, try to figure out what to do with these different species. Go to college and learn about permitting and figure in, so you can go and really help states and communities think about spatial planning and how to make sure farms are integrated into local use. So I think there are a lot of ways to engage, and honestly, this is also new. We need, all hands on deck of people trying to solve problems.
Absolutely. Great advice. One of my very favorite questions to ask is, what is your favorite field story or stories to tell? And you have spent a lot of time on the water, so I'm sure you have lots to pull from. This could be like the best day ever, and you just had it was just everything went right. Or it could be everything went wrong, and now it's a great story, but at the time you were kind of in it.
I don't know if this is what you're looking for, but the story that comes to mind is actually a story that's told in Newfoundland after the cod stocks crashed. And
Okay.
it's a story about how those of us on the water were not doing it just for money.
Mhm.
So after the cod stocks crashed, a woman from New York came to take over one of the processing plants, and she was going to create jobs for the whole community. Everybody was all excited. You ask, what are we gonna make in the factory? And it was seatbelts for pets. Okay. And despite everyone in Newfoundland just struggling desperately, they just didn't show up for those jobs because it had no meaning. Like, that pride of helping feed your country. There's certain jobs in the economy like this, whether it's steel workers, coal miners, farmers, and fishermen. These folks that are just proud of building, powering, and feeding the country. Jobs that you can write and sing songs about.
Mhm.
That's the goal. And very often politicians and public policy just don't understand. They think we just want money, and then we'll stop working on the ocean, stop fishing and stuff like that. And it's just not the case. We're out there just because we love every moment.
And people want meaningful work.
Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely. So at the end of every episode, I like to give the audience something to go forth and do. And you had a couple of great ones at the beginning of the episode that we kind of chatted about. What would you like the audience to go take from today?
Yeah. So first, go out and get some of that weird tasting seaweed and get creative, right? In the book, we have a bunch of recipes that I think are very approachable and doable for the home chef. And every time you go out and buy shellfish or seaweeds, you're not only employing someone, like helping a farmer survive, but you're helping the planet. You're All of those crops are breathing life back into the ecosystem. So get cooking, get your kids to enjoy this stuff, and it's a chance to be creative. Like, start creating this climate cuisine in your own home. I think the other thing is, start a you might start a farm, but how not maybe get together with some folks and start a local underwater community garden. Just like on land, we got community gardens all over the place. Let's do them in the ocean and use them educational platforms. Teach people kids skills like boating and about good honorable work and about how to grow food and stuff like that. So I'd love to see 500 community gardens here at some point.
Great asks. If the audience wants to find you, connect with you, and learn more about GreenWave, what is the best place to do that?
Yes, so head over to our website, which is greenwave.org, and there's ways to get involved, to volunteer, you can donate, and all that's really gonna help. And come and join the community. It's been a fun journey, and it's going to continue to be.
Yeah, I've spent some time on your website. It really is worth checking out. And your book is fascinating. Eat Like a Fish. If anybody is looking for a great read, it's a page turner. I wasn't expecting it. I've read a lot of nonfiction lately, and I picked it up, and it was very easy to read. So
It's a bit of a salty tale, so it is by a fisherman.
it's very good. Well, Brent, thank you so much for your time, and thank you for being on the show today.
Absolutely, real honor to be on, and it was fun.
Thank you for listening to today's show. I'd love to hear any insight you've gleaned. Leave a comment in the show notes or send me an email over at marinebio.life. If you enjoyed this episode, leave a review and, of course, share with your friends. If you want more resources for ocean news, including conservation topics and careers, plus personal insight from me that I just don't share anywhere else, join me at marinebio.life and sign up for email updates. Keep after your dreams and making waves in your community. One person can make a difference. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll catch you next time on the So You Want to Be a Marine Biologist podcast.